satisfaction from the meal. And so it just allows you to consume less calories while getting the same flavor. Another thing is with beef. Some of the grass-fed beef or some of the more high-quality beef tends to be leaner. The way we produce beef in this country is pretty bad. We give beef corn and grains, which isn't part of their natural diet. And what that does is fattens it up, and that makes the meat fattier. And so they have on the market is grass-finished or grass-fed beef, and that tends to be a leaner beef. And so with the same piece of beef, you're getting less fat, if that makes sense. And it might be a little bit more expensive, but that's a way in which paying for quality helps you out by allowing you to take in less. So something to try. So here's an example from when I was talking about Tupperware. So where you can take one huge pot that you made on Sunday, and then go throughout the week and use that to craft healthy meals. So let's just say you cooked a huge pot of marinara sauce on Sunday. So on Sunday night you just had plain old spaghetti marinara. Say it was wheat spaghetti. Then on Monday you can have a chicken sandwich on wheat with Parmesan and marinara dressing. So you use that marinara again to make a completely different meal. Then on Tuesday, you mix it with some egg whites, some Parmesan, some spinach, and then you make a spaghetti bake. So it's kind of like what you made on Sunday, but if you've ever made that before, it's a completely different flavor. Wednesday, you make a wheat French bread pizza. Thursday, mix in some fresh veggies and you have a pasta primavera. Friday, you make some turkey meatballs and you have spaghetti with meatballs. So anyway, it's just an example how you can take a sauce like this and use it for meals throughout the week to create healthy options for your family, as opposed to going to Popeyes or resorting to those TV dinners, processed foods. Make your own foods, make your own processed foods, keep them in the freezer and use those. And a lot of this has to do with what Dr. Harlan was promoting, and that's you've got to have a game plan, because you know in your week when you're going to have a meeting that runs late, or maybe you know when you have a late afternoon meeting. You know when your kid has a wrestling practice or a football game or something like that. You know when you're not going to have time, and you have to plan for that. If you're trying to lose weight, you have to plan for those situations so that you don't go out and slip by buying that high-fat processed food, high-fat, high-salt processed food. And you can go to your fridge, for example, and take that ready-made meal that you already have. Dr. Harlan gave the example out that very few people know what they're going to eat in 3 days. Plan your meals. That way you know you're going to have a healthy meal every day of the week. Use that fruit and vegetable calendar, because that'll help you plan. That's how you can track your progress to make sure that you're continually increasing your fruit and vegetable intake. Just some more basic tips. One of the things I used to hear a lot from people is that they weren't able to keep vegetables or fruits because they would go bad before they could use them a lot of times, because they sell to more than they can use at one time. A lot of vegetables freeze really well. So sometimes what will happen is if my girlfriend and I go shopping at different times, we end up with too much food. I'll take, say we both bought broccoli or something, I can take that broccoli, put it in the freezer, freeze it, and now I have some frozen broccoli in the freezer that I can use later. And so use the freezer whenever you can to try to prevent that from happening. Don't use vegetables going bad as an excuse to not keep them in the kitchen. And it's the same thing with fruit. And a great thing with fruit that you can do is cut up some fruit, keep it in the freezer, and then use it later for smoothies. Take some non-fat yogurt, maybe just a little tiny bit of orange juice, add those frozen fruits that you have in your freezer, and there you have a serving of fruit in the morning. So, again, just things to try. Oh, another thing that you can try is throw vegetables in things that you wouldn't normally do. When you think of an omelet, you probably think of the ham and cheese omelet. That's a classic omelet. But you can also make an omelet with some leftover broccoli from the night before. You can make an omelet with some baby spinach that you might have for a salad that you're planning on making later that night. So that's a way to get your vegetable servings in the morning. So, it's all about finding these creative ways to increase your fruit and vegetable intake. I just kind of talked about this. But I mean, even with sandwiches, you can load them up with veggies, shred some carrots up, put those on there. have some fresh squash and slice those up like you would slice up a cucumber and put that on a sandwich. I mean, try it. You might like it. You might not, but try it. I'm going to talk about ways to make your soups more vegetable rich by throwing greens in your soup, and that's an old Portuguese technique that I'm going to talk about later. Measure your servings. Dr. Harlan talked about this last week, but it's something that's very, very important if you're undergoing a diet where you're trying to lose weight. And there are certain areas where it's more important to measure than others. Salt, very important, especially for individuals who have high blood pressure. Don't just take the salt and pour it in. You don't know how much you're putting in your food, and you're trying to decrease your intake. So measure how much you're using, that way you know. Sugar, same thing. About a tablespoon of sugar equals 48 calories, which isn't a whole lot, but when you're continually putting sugar in something, at least you know how many calories you're putting in at a time, as opposed to you just take the sugar and pour it in. Carbs. It's a big thing with pasta. Dr. Harlan talked about this last week about how I think it was 8 servings of pasta are in an actual box of pasta, not 2. And so measure out that 1 cup of pasta. I talked about using a fist or a baseball as kind of a reference for a serving. But I mean, if you really want to be exact, and if you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to cut calories, use measuring cups and measure. Dr. Harlan's real big on the food scales, and so I looked, and he's right. You can get a basic food scale for $6, which is nothing. And that's a great way to measure things like meats, which you can't take a cup measure and measure how much meat you're eating. You've got to actually use a scale, and you can say, okay, am I having a 4-ounce piece of beef? And you put it on the scale and you verify that. Because who knows, you could be eating an 8-ounce piece, a 10-ounce piece. You'd be surprised at how much you're eating if you don't measure it. So this is a way to really keep track of what you're eating. So now I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to talk about supplements, because every time we do one of these sessions, people have questions about supplements. Because there's a huge, huge market out there, and people love to take your money. So fiber supplements. People talk a whole lot about fiber supplements. They say, oh, can I just get my fiber from fiber supplements? I like taking this fiber pill every day. And that's fine. I mean, that might work for you. But if you're not, there's a problem here. There's a reason you're not getting enough fiber in your diet. That means you're not eating enough whole grains, you're not eating enough fruits, and you're not eating enough vegetables. Which means you're not following the diet that's going to help you lose weight. So if you think you're going to fix the problem by just eating fiber, that's kind of skirting around the problem, and there's a problem with the food that you're taking in. So get your fiber from fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, because it's not just the fiber that you want. It's all that other stuff that's in the food as well. Some people, however, might have medical conditions where increased fiber intake is warranted by your doctor. So if you have irritable bowel syndrome or one of the inflammatory bowel diseases, constipation, or something like that, then in that case, use the fiber. It's part of the treatment for your condition. But get your fiber from natural food. Energy drinks. Here's a big thing as well. I don't know why people are so big on them. I guess I'll admit I drank them a little bit in undergrad when I was trying to study, but they taste like motor oil for one. They claim to give you wings, but they also give you a lot of sugar, and they can give you heart palpitations. So, I mean, you weigh the risks and benefits there. I can't really say that they're necessarily bad for you if they don't have sugar in them, but the contents of them aren't regulated by any regulatory agency, and they are potentially harmful. I mean, the stuff that's in these energy drinks is really anybody's guess on what effect they have on your body. So I really would not encourage you to drink these regularly. Stick with coffee and tea. There's been some good research on coffee and tea. One in particular that I like is that up to 6 cups of coffee a day reduces the risk for heart disease, stroke, and cancer. So just use coffee and tea to keep yourself awake rather than